Hello. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years since I sat in Mrs. Swanson's AVID classroom at Claremont High School. There are a couple of changes in my life that are constant reminders of the time that has passed. I frequently use the term diet, and I've traded in my football for a set of golf clubs. Just as there have been changes in my life, there have been changes with the AVID program. However, I think there are some core principles from my perspective that have remained the same. Making connections with students, challenging students to take more rigorous classes, providing students with the support needed to succeed in those classes, and preparing students for the future. These elements were a part of my experience in the AVID program, and I still see it happening with students today. I recall my first AVID meeting with Mrs. Swanson at the gym at Marston Junior High. She had identified a number of students for a new program, and she was conducting interviews for acceptance into the program. She had a series of questions that she asked each student, and I remember the focus being on one main question: do you have a goal of going to college? Not knowing that my answer and the sincerity of my answer would have an incredible impact on my life, I answered the question with a big yes. That yes placed me on a path that has paved my life with opportunities and many blessings. My life growing up is probably similar to the lives of many of your students. I was raised by my mother and grandmother, and I was the first in my immediate family to graduate from high school. Both my mother and grandmother were great role models for hard work and integrity. They grew up at a time and in an area where children went to work on the farm as sharecroppers to support the family. They had a goal for me and my sisters of going to college and establishing careers. Mrs. Swanson made a connection with my grandmother and mother shortly after I was accepted in the program. One evening, she had a bus just for the AVID students, where she rode home with us to Southeast San Diego and met with our families. This allowed her to get to know our families, and our families a chance to get to know her and her program. My mother still fondly inquires about Mrs. Swanson 30 years later. This is a true testament to the connection she made with our families. And the fact that I still refer to Mrs. Swanson as Mrs. Swanson shows the connection that she made with me. I recently had a chance to hear a great story about a pair of green socks. The story hit home for me because I could relate to the situation, and it was an example of how AVID teachers are second parents to their students. In May, we held our AVID board meeting in Dallas. We had a chance to visit some very impressive students at Berkner High School in the Richardson School District. Miss Jones Swim shared a story about one of her students who had called her in a panic because he had gone to school wearing a pair of green socks, and they were going to an event that day, and he felt to be dressed appropriately, he should be wearing black socks. So he called Miss Swim to see if she had socks that she could bring to school for him to wear to the event. I was first impressed that he had his teacher's cell number. And second, that he felt comfortable making the request. These types of requests are made and fulfilled by AVID teachers all over the world. I want to take a moment to say thank you. It's this type of dedication and commitment to students in and outside of the classroom that helps establish that trust and critical connection. I had a number of friends that made connections outside of the classroom, and it led to them being incarcerated or headed down a path that was filled with pitfalls. For me and many of the students, we were able to make the linkage between education and quality of life. Some friends pursued a legal means to improve the quality of life, which led to a shortened life and one of constant turmoil. Mrs. Swanson's connections with her students led to our increased confidence that we could take on any challenge and succeed. Taking more rigorous courses was an expectation Mrs. Swanson had for every student in that first class. I remember a number of us taking Mr. Grove's honors English class. We were nervous to be in a class that we felt was for the very smart. Through the support of Mrs. Swanson, Mr. Grove, and the AVID tutors, we were able to compete and stay on par with the other students in the class. One of the greatest lessons in life for me was learned in Mr. Grove's class. I learned that through working through the challenges of learning a difficult subject comes a true learning of the subject. In Mr. Grove's class, we had to learn the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. We spent weeks learning the prologue in preparation to recite it in front of the class. The pain I went through to learn the prologue paid off on the day I had to recite it in front of the class. I knew it, and I still remember much of it today. In fact, Maximo Escobedo, another member of that first class, and I were discussing the Canterbury Tales experience a few years ago, and he too remembers much of the prologue. Whenever I have a chance to talk to students, I share with them there is value in the struggle and that they will grow from the experience. In my 22-year sales career with the Xerox Corporation, I have had to take on similar learning experiences where I've had to learn Xerox products and services for demonstration or presentation validation. Through this process, I would present to a superior or to a team. It provides a double value. I learned to present the subject matter while learning the subject matter. I mentioned the support we received with more rigorous courses at Mrs. Swanson's, from Mrs. Swanson, the tutors, and Mr. Grove. Not every teacher was supportive of Mrs. Swanson and her new program. She fought for her students and for the program. She came to our defense when warranted, and we were held accountable with equal measure. Lack of effort, poor citizenship, not meeting established deadlines was not acceptable. Some students pushed back on the note-taking and challenged, why did we have to take notes in every class? Mrs. Swanson quickly established an understanding of the importance of note-taking and that it was non-negotiable. For those that did not take notes and did not follow the rules could not stay in the class. We adhered to the rules and quickly saw positive changes in our grades. The note-taking and listening skills I developed in AVID helped me tremendously when I was in college. I knew how to take notes and to listen for those key points in the lecture. I also use those skills today on the job. When working with my team or with the customer to solve a problem, it is critical that I listen and accurately capture the situation through taking notes. Similar to writing potential test questions in the margin, I ask questions based on my notes to better understand the problem so that I can develop a solution. When it came to defending her students, Mrs. Swanson was up for the task if she felt perhaps we were not being treated appropriately. My mother remembers a time when Mrs. Swanson called her about a comment made to me by one of my teachers. The teacher used a term that questioned my intelligence. My mother was ready to visit the school to address the comment. Mrs. Swanson told her not to worry, she would handle the situation with the teacher. By Mrs. Swanson addressing the issue, she saved it from becoming a bigger issue. I knew that once it was shared with my grandmother, it would have definitely mushroomed. Our parents placed an incredible amount of trust in Mrs. Swanson, and she never let them down. We were also taught to handle the challenges and confrontations we were facing and would face in the future with dignity and a sense of control. I recall attending a guest visit day in Mr. Ross Adcock's world history class, where Mrs. Swanson gained permission for her students to attend what would be a very unique learning experience. Mr. Ross Adcock was known for doing some very interesting things in class, and he would invite guest speakers that I think he would have a challenge getting approved today. On this particular day, he invited the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, this encounter could have gone a number of different directions based on the guest, his views, and his audience of teenagers. In sports, there's a saying that a team takes on the persona of its head coach. I have to say we were coached well by Mrs. Swanson, and on that day her students were a reflection of their teacher. When hearing that African Americans had made no positive contributions to society and that the history books were filled with lies, I felt compelled to respond. I did so in a way that made the Grand Dragon uncomfortable, the uncomfortable one in the room. By asking questions in a respectful and dignified way, questions that challenged his views and pointed out the absurdity of his comments, led him to refusing to take more of my questions. I learned from that experience that you do not have to resort to anger or attacks to confront the challenges we face in life. We can verbally slay our dragons through critical thinking and attacking the problem and not the person. That lesson still resonates with me today when I have to confront issues within my business. Confrontations within a work environment are not always bad. If approached with appropriate fashion, you can have growth as a company and growth as an individual. I pride myself on treating everyone with respect, no matter what has created the situation we are discussing. It may have to end with me making a tough decision, and the person may not agree or like what I have to do. However, we move forward knowing that everyone has been heard and respected in the process. In addition to teaching us to handle difficult conversations and how to take notes, we also learn to plan and take control of our future. In college, I had the mindset to plan my own graduation. When I decided to attend the University of Utah to play football, I knew Mrs. Swanson was not happy with my decision. She wanted me to attend UC Berkeley, and they had shown interest in me playing football there as well. By the end of the recruiting process, their interest had diminished, and I had to make a decision. First of all, we'll be forever thankful to Mrs. Swanson, the tutors, and the teachers that put me in the position to have a choice. While making my decision, I promised Mrs. Swanson that wherever university I chose, I would get my degree. I'm not sure if that made her feel any better, but she was supportive every step of the way. What made me feel confident in making that commitment was I felt that AVID had prepared me to focus with the end in mind. In high school, it was to get accepted into college. In college, it was to get my degree and start a career. At many universities, when it comes to student athletes, the focus is on making sure the athletes are eligible to play. At the end of their time at the university, a player may not have the credits needed to earn their diploma. Through understanding the A through G requirements while in AVID, I understood that I needed to make sure I stayed on track while in college to attain my degree. AVID taught me to seek support and ask questions of my professors when needed. I learned in AVID to work collaboratively with others. In college, there were times we had to work in groups to complete a project. AVID taught me to respect the opinions of others and produce under deadlines. I use those skills today when working cross-functionally to achieve our corporate goals. In preparing me for the future, I had an option when I graduated in 1983. I had a choice of attending some great universities. Many of my friends were not in the same position and were limited in their options after graduating from high school. Some went directly into the workforce, and some floundered looking for direction. Many students, while in high school, don't realize the impact their decisions, both positively and negatively, have on their future. AVID gave me a view into the future through the college field trips, the plays we attended, and our discussions regarding potential careers. These types of events were not only inspirational, they helped me look beyond high school. After utilizing the tools AVID provided me to earn my degree, the next chapter of my life began when I started interviewing for jobs through the Career Placement Center on the campus of the University of Utah. Once again, it was an incredible feeling to have options. I interviewed with a number of companies and chose to go to work for the Xerox Corporation. There were some key steps that helped me prepare for the interviewing process. First, my godparents bought me 2 interviewing suits. I am always impressed when I meet AVID students at different events. They are always well-dressed, and I know that it is something that is stressed in AVID. When they enter the workforce, they will have to interact with someone, perhaps even today, to prepare for a class or looking at part-time work, making that positive first impression is critical. With two teenage sons at home, I'm constantly having discussions regarding wearing a belt, and I will insist when attending family functions that they wear a shirt with a collar. As a general manager of our outsourcing division in San Diego, Washington, and Oregon, I have personnel that work on site at some of our customers' offices. We have a dress code, and at times my managers have to provide counsel to team members that are not dressed appropriately. I think that it is great that appearance is a focus of AVID, and I recognize that the work being done building the confidence of students. AVID students, when greeting individuals, do so with a firm handshake and they look you right in the eye. This type of student development falls outside of the core educational development, but I think it is critical in bringing it all together. When you have a student that has the reading, the writing, the critical thinking skills, all packaged with confidence and a professional look, you have a very powerful student, one that is prepared to make a positive contribution to their community, society, and perhaps the world. When I reflect on my life, I've accomplished many of the goals that I've set for myself when I was younger, and I still have many goals left to achieve. AVID has been instrumental in helping me make advancements both personally and professionally. It is difficult for me to picture my life without AVID, and I feel truly blessed to have answered yes when asked if I had a goal of going to college. Thank you for all that you do for your students, and I look forward to hearing from one of your students at AVID's 50th anniversary. Thank you.